Rahim, Lost Islamic History. Today we are going to talk about Hazrat Umar radhiyallahu anhu. Like Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu, Umar was an early convert to Islam. He accepted the religion at the hands of the Prophet in sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Makkah before the Hijrah, and was with him at all the major battles and events in Medina. There could be no doubting his credentials to lead the Muslim state, and based on Islamic tradition, there appears to have been no disagreement regarding his succession to office. This kind of stability in governance and succession would be sorely missed later in Islamic history. Unlike Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu, Umar didn't have to deal with questions of political stability or the continuity of the religion. The entire Arabian Peninsula was united under his command. The massive military effort that spread throughout the peninsula in the wars of apostasy gave the Muslim state the confidence and skills to begin thinking seriously about their territorial expansion to the north. Furthermore, the traditional Arab way of life that was confined to the Arabian Peninsula was no longer feasible. For centuries, Arabs had survived through the continual raiding of rival tribes and the subsequent spoils of war. Now that the vast majority of Arabia was Muslim, such raids on neighboring tribes meant contravening Islamic law. The Prophet ﷺ had spoken on numerous occasions about the entire Muslim population being one ummah or nation. It was inconceivable that nation would go on through history in constant conflict with itself. Partly to remove chances of inter-Islamic conflict, and partly to provide security to the few Arab tribes that were converting to Islam within Byzantine and Sassanid borders. The Muslim armies turned north, where their greatest conquest would come. Raids into Sassanid-controlled Mesopotamia already began during the last year of Abu Bakr's life and continued once Umar took power. At first, Umar and other leading Muslims probably didn't foresee these raids turning into permanent conquest, but a devastating war between the Byzantines and Sassanids that lasted from 603 to 623 left the imperial powers weak and unable to hold off waves of Arab Muslims arriving at their borders. The fertile lands of Mesopotamia and Syria were ready to fall. All that was needed was an organized assault by the Muslims. This would be a new type of war, however. Unlike the campaigns of destruction that the two empires had waged, the Muslim calls for the message of Muhammad The Muslim calls for war were combined with the calls for justice and social harmony consistent with the message of Muhammad. When Abu Bakr sent out the first armies, he ordered his forces to secure the safety of women, children, and the elderly, to leave monks in their monasteries unmolested, and even to refrain from destroying crops. These rules couldn't have been more different from what the Arabs engaging in these conquests were used to do before Islam, but Muhammad's movement had been revolutionary from the start. Old ideas, traditions, and ways of life had to give way to a new order, and that extended to warfare. Armies were simultaneously sent into Syria and Mesopotamia. In 633, Khalid ibn al-Walid, fresh off his victories in the wars of apostasy, led the detachment headed towards the Persians. Meanwhile, Yazid, the son of Abu Sufyan, lead the armies sent to Syria, where he quickly managed to defeat a Byzantine force near Gaza. For the Byzantines, the surprising loss indicated this could turn out to be imperial army to mobilize and prepare to crush the Arabs before they were able to consolidate their victory. The Medina government was aware that this was a possibility, and Khalid was ordered to immediately leave Iraq, where he had already had some success, and travel across the waterless Syrian desert to reinforce the armies there. The combined Muslim forces met the Byzantines at the Battle of Ajnadin, about 30 kilometers west of Jerusalem, where the Muslim armies completely routed the imperial force under the command of the emperor's own brother. The remaining Byzantine troops in southern Syria retreated to the well-fortified cities of Jerusalem, Caesarea and Gaza, and leaving the victorious Muslims free to roam the countryside of Palestine. The Muslim armies under the command of Khalid bin Walid moved north and laid siege to the ancient city of Damascus, which fell in September 635. The treaty he forged after the city capitulated was intended to allay the fears of the locals. In it, Umar and who promised that their lives, property and religion would be safeguarded from any harassment so long as a tribute to the Muslim government was paid. This set the tone for the fighting, that it was aimed at the Byzantine government and army, not the civilians. With such guarantees, there would be a much lower chance of rebellions by the Syrian population, which was essential considering that a relatively small Bedouin force was now beginning to occupy a large and diverse province in Syria. The loss of Damascus caused the Byzantine emperor to assemble an even large force with the hopes of sending the Arabs back into deserts for good. Khalid knew his raiding force was no match for the bulk of the imperial army and decided to withdraw south, stalling the inevitable climactic battle between the two sides. Eventually, Heraclius' army caught up with the Muslim force at Yarmouk along the border of present-day Jordan and Syria. In the summer of 636, the Byzantine force was much larger, better equipped and better trained, but morale was low as numerous rivalries and quarrels caused friction in the ranks. Taking advantage of this and the familiarity the Arabs had fighting in rough terrain, the Muslim force decisively defeated the Byzantines. Byzantine army was chased off the battlefield and chased to an effective fighting force capable of any military action. Emperor Heraclius was forced to concede defeat in Syria, as he had neither the soldiers nor the money to hold off the Muslim invasion. Cities throughout Syria fell one by one, all of them given terms similar to the ones given to Damascus by Khalid ibn al-Walid. By 638, the conquest of Syria was complete. From there, the fight against the Byzantines continued in Egypt, which fell relatively quickly. By 642, two of the Byzantine Empire's most valuable and prosperous regions had fallen into the hands of people they had scarcely, scarcely considered important enough to recognize before Islam. In 70 AD, the Roman Empire exiled Jews from Jerusalem. It was not until the Muslim conquest in 637 that they were allowed back to the holy city. Within a few years, Syria had gone from a land firmly under the control of Byzantine Empire to a province of the growing Muslim Empire. For the victorious Muslims, the conquest must not have seemed that surprising. After all, they believed that God was on their side so long as they adhered to the religion that He sent down through Muhammad. The examples of Badr and the conquest of Makkah from the time of the Prophet proved to them that victory was possible in the face of overwhelming odds with God's help. For the Byzantines, the loss of Syria was simply the first domino to fall in the final decline of the successor to the Roman Empire. Imperial armies would never again march through Christianity's holy land, nor would they even again reap the economic benefits of this fertile region. For the locals living in Syria, however, the Byzantine laws didn't have much of an impact on daily life. Churches continued to operate, peasants farmed land, and trade caravans passed through as they had before. To help sort out the civil administration of the region, Umar personally traveled from Medina to Syria. One of his first actions in the country was to relieve Khalid ibn al-Walid of his post. This no doubt shocked everyone, including Khalid himself. Among the many possible reasons for forcing Khalid into retirement, Muslim historians in the past tended to settle on desire to remind the Muslim armies that God, not Khalid, was the reason for their victories. If the Muslim could sustain this streak of battlefield victories without one of the greatest generals of all time, it would serve as proof for those with weak faith of the divine guidance the and the divine guidance and help for their mission. When it came to governorship of the new province, Umar appointed Muawiyah, the son of the Meccan aristocrat Abu Sufyan. He hailed from the wealthy and powerful Umayyad family, which had a major role in the administration of Quraysh before Islam. That lineage of governance would serve Muawiyah well in turning Syria from a new province to the economic and political heart of the Muslim world over the next 20 years. While Umar was in Syria, he personally attended to the surrender of Jerusalem in 637. He was given a guided tour of the city by the Patriarch Sophronius, an Arab Christian who had risen to become one of the leading figures of the Greek Church in Jerusalem. The terms of the treaty that was signed with the leaders of Jerusalem was similar to others put in place throughout Syria. What is unique about the Muslim conquest here, however, is that the new governors of Jerusalem allowed Jews to come to the city to worship for the first time in over 500 years. Islamic scripture holds the Christian and Jewish religions in special esteem, calling them the people of the book. It would not have made sense in Islamic law to allow the Christian freedom to visit their holy sites in Jerusalem while upholding the Byzantine laws preventing Jews from doing so. This precedent of freedom and religious pluralism was based on Muhammad's Constitution of Medina. which Umar radhiyallahu anhu was of course intricately familiar with. Yet, while acknowledging the rights Christians and Jews had in Jerusalem, Umar radhiyallahu anhu was keen to send the message that this city also belonged to Islam. According to Islamic belief, this was a city to which Muhammad traveled in his miraculous night journey from Mecca, where he prayed on the site of the house of worship built by his fellow prophets Solomon, and then ascended to heaven. There could built by his fellow prophet Solomon and then ascended to heaven. There could built by there for that there could be no minimizing the importance of Jerusalem in the Islamic tradition, and with this in mind, Umar set about cleaning the temple mount, which the Romans and then Byzantines had let fall into disuse. Upon the mount, he erected the first version of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. After the fall of Syria, the attention of the Caliph went back to the Sassanid Empire, which had been mostly ignored since Khalid bin Walid was ordered to move his armies to Syria. Umar appointed another veteran of Arab warfare who fought with the Prophet Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas to lead the Muslim armies into Mesopotamia. Despite initial setbacks due to the Arabs' inability to deal with war elephants, Sa'd's army managed to defeat the Persians at the Battle of Qadisiyah in late 636. The battle saw significant spoils fall into Muslim hands, much of it forwarded to Medina for distribution. According to Islamic law and the temporary defeat of the Sassanid army, if the Muslims really wanted to hold Iraq, however, they would have to take Ctesiphon, the Sassanid capital. Ctesiphon was not a well defended city. It lay on the plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, about 60 kilometers north of the ancient city of Babylon. After a siege that lasted about 2 months in early 637, the imperial city fell to the Muslim forces. The entire Tigris Euphrates plain was now firmly under the control of the Muslim armies, with the Sassanid emperor and his government fleeing into the Persian highlands. Despite the string of impressive victories, Umar forbade his army from pursuing the Sassanids outside of Arab. In Mesopotamia, the land was familiar enough to the Arab tribesmen that traditional military tactics proved useful. In the Iranian plateau, the Arabs would be unfamiliar with the terrain and could be decisively defeated. Furthermore, the native population there was entirely Persian, unlike in Iraq, and resistance from both the Sassanid army as well as the locals could be expected. The royal standards of the Sassanids was captured at Qadisiyah and taken to Medina, rather than keep it as a symbol of Islam's victory over Persia. Umar ordered that it be destroyed and its jewels and gold be sold to feed the poor. Umar's time as caliph is noteworthy not just for his military conquests but also his administration over conquered territories. One of the most impressive aspects of the conquest and subsequent incorporation of them into the Muslim Empire was the fact that life barely changed for most inhabitants of the conquered lands. The Byzantine and Sassanid armies and aristocratic class left as the Muslims moved in, but the local populations remained untouched. There were only two main changes in the lives of the conquered people. The first was who they paid their taxes to. Previously they had paid taxes, oftentimes oppressively high taxes used to fund the ongoing wars to the governments in Constantinople and Tisiphone. Now they paid a tribute in accordance with Islamic law that was forwarded to Medina. In most cases, this tribute didn't exceed the previous taxes and often times was much less. For an everyday citizen, lower taxes are usually good news regardless of who collects it. The second major change was the religious tolerance given to certain groups. Monophysite Christians who differed from the ruling Greek Orthodox on matters of the nature of Christ were allowed to practice their religion in Syria, a welcome change from the oppressive nature of the Byzantine government. Jews were similarly relieved of official oppression and were allowed to go back to their holiest city, Jerusalem, to worship. In the former Sassanid lands, Nestorian Christians saw increased religious freedom as the ruling Zoroastrians had routinely restricted their freedoms on suspicions of being secretly allied with the Christian Byzantine Empire. Tensions, of course, still existed between religious groups, especially since the settled Christians of the Fertile Crescent probably resented the rule of nomadic Semites from the desert, but overall the egalitarian nature of Muhammad's message helped usher in an era of religious tolerance that had mostly been absent in the Middle East previously. In economic terms, the conquest brought unimaginable wealth to the relatively simple Arabs. Thousands of silver and gold coins and valuable gems flowed from conquered lands, particularly Iraq, into Medina as part of the spoils of war. In keeping with the precepts of Islamic law, the spoils were considered to belong to the entire Muslim community and were divided among members of the Ummah, from the earliest converts to Islam to the newest known Arabs to accept the religion. A huge boom in economic activity ensued in Mecca and Medina, with new houses being built regularly and huge estates being established to provide continued economic growth after the conquest ended. For the first time in Islamic history, immense wealth came into the hands of a Muslim government. Through 10 years as the Caliph of the Muslim world, Umar anhu had taken the young Muslim state from a desert-based raiding society to a regional power. This rapid expansion, coupled with social stability, is proof of his incredible capabilities as an administrator and leader, and he has thus gone down as one of the most successful rulers in Islamic history. His reign came to a sudden end in 644 when he was murdered in Medina by a Persian slave who had a personal grudge against the charismatic leader. While on his deathbed, Umar appointed a council of 6 well-respected leaders of the community of Medina to choose his successor from among themselves. They chose Uthman bin Affan, another early convert to Islam, who, unlike Abu Bakr and Umar, came from Umayyad clan of Makkah and was a very wealthy and powerful man before accepting Islam. No doubt, seeing the success of Umar's policies, Uthman promised to follow in Umar anhu footsteps and uphold the same practices as the deceased caliph, which lead to his appointment in late 644.